Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode of Hill Country Treasures. Back with me, as always, Mike Russ, owner and founder of MR Mint Coins and Collectibles. Welcome back, Mike.
Hello.
Mike, today we're going to take up family heirlooms and estate collections, something that unfortunately many families face eventually, which is what to do with inherited coins, jewelry, silver, currency, or estate items, whether it's a box from a parent or a grandparent. It might be in a safe, it might be in a drawer. Where do you start?
So a lot of families, when they come in, they have no clue what they have most of the time. I would say 95% of the time they have no clue what they have because it's generally what grandpa, grandma, whatever had inherited or collected and they inherited. So they bring it in. It's in a box. Biggest thing about that is I generally like looking at the box and say, okay, I try to assess how the collector, the grandma, grandpa collected, right? And it always tells a story that makes sense. They'll come in and they'll have coin books, which are collectible coin books, like the wheat penny books. That's a very common thing that comes through. And then they'll have coins and flips where they're stapled together and they wrote on them. This is the collectible side of it. And then there's the collector that would bring in just the rolls of coins or whatever, and I have to go through them and count them all and weigh them all and all that stuff like that. When they come into us, I'd like to ask them a few questions, how the grandpa, grandma collected or whoever it was that collected, what they like to collect, this and that, kind of develop a good relationship with them first. When they come in, I like to say, hey, I'm from here. This is where I'm from. My roots are here in Kerrville. Where are you from? And just kind of develop a good, comfortable situation when we first start with a collection or estate. So that's kind of how it started off.
So I'm a lawyer by professional background. Unfortunately, I've lost both of my parents, so I understand, even as someone who's been trained professionally to be dispassionate and objective, it still can be a very emotional time.
It is.
Yeah. And it even if you think you're ready when you walk in that store, when you put that down in front of someone like Mike Russ, you're going to feel a set of emotions. How do you help people navigate those in a place that is not that you're open to the public, but you're a public store and, you're in front of other people? How do you really help that part of the journey?
It's good to talk about them. It's good to talk about the person that they lost, and try to get into the same level of emotions. There's a lot of hugs given too at my business, believe it or not. You want to, because you're coming into a store, you don't know anything about me other than what we advertise or whatever. And they're here to find out what they want to sell. And it is emotional. When they come in and I remember something vividly. This happened a year and a half ago, at least, kind of when I first started, actually, not even further back than that. When I first started, I remember a lady came in, brought a lot of jewelry in, and she was very emotional. And how I bring it, I said, you don't have to sell this now. I'm just here to help you out. And that's kind of the best way of doing it. So you just don't pressure them. Let them talk about what they have to talk about. Try to do your best to listen. And I would say, just don't say you don't have to sell this today. And that's the biggest thing. So you're here to find out what your stuff's worth. That's what I'm here for, is being transparent. Talk to them about it and that's where I have to go with it. Let's just take it one step at a time, real slow. You're not fast, not try to hurry it up. There's hotel shows that come into town, this and that. Our setup's a lot different because you're going to see me at HEB. So you got to really be compassionate about it when they come in and not just tear into the stuff and say, oh, this is what I'm going to pay you for it. So communication, talk a little bit about it. There's times that I talk to someone for 10 to 15 minutes before I even dug into the box that I just talked about 2 seconds ago. But yeah.
Let me pick up on something you said, because I'm not sure I've ever visited with you about it. You said HEB. I've talked to a lot of businessmen, public officials, school administrators in this town, and we're a town of 20,000 plus. And they routinely tell me they'll go to HEB. I have to make sure, one, they look professional. Two is people will not think twice about walking up to the school superintendent or walking up to the bank president or walking up to anyone and just starting a conversation with them. And you're part of the community. Do you get that too as the owner of your company?
Yeah, I see a lot of faces that it happens a lot, more than often. I mean, generally what happens is when I run into someone, I always like to say, hey, what's up? And then sometimes they're surprised and they're looking at me and they go, and they say, yeah, I'm the guy. You sold stuff to me or whatever. It happens a lot. It's a good feeling when you see that. But when I mean by that, here's the biggest thing about the business I'm in is that you don't want to pull wool over people's eyes in this business, because if you get found out that you just totally took advantage of the situation, that's not what I want to fall into. That's why I try to be transparent about in my business, because I will see you probably in town in public. And if you treat someone wrong, and I hear a lot of horror stories about this a lot of times, and I don't ever want to fall in this trap. And I try to tell my employees, like when they come in, always assume they already know what they have, no matter what, and treat it that way. And it's the best way of treating things and our customers in town is just treat them like they're your own grandmother, basically, because you don't want to. It's a very lucrative business, and you can very easily change percentages and take advantage of people, like collectible coins. Like if you have a rare collectible coin, you can just say, hey, this is this silver coin. And it's hard to convince people in that too, because when you're like, my biggest reward was when I find a coin that's worth way more than silver, and talking about thousands of dollars on a coin, to where Morgan silver dollar. I always talk about the Morgan silver dollars, because the Morgan silver dollar or any coin is going to look the same no matter what. A $10,000 coin is going to look the same as a $30 coin. Does that make sense? Because it's a rare coin. It's got that little mint mark on there. So there's just things like that you have to worry about. And when you say about HEB, that's the best way of putting it, is you're going to see them in town when you're running around.
So my father was a stamp collector, and I knew that all my life. And I had no idea what that meant. I knew he bought stamps. That was it. And after he passed away, I found his stamp collection, and it was binders and binders from the 50s all the way forward. And I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? How does someone like myself, when your father, perhaps your grandfather passes away, and you knew they were a collector, but you really had no idea what that meant, how do you begin to think through the process of evaluation and sale, if appropriate? Or maybe, to my utter shock, my daughter, his granddaughter, wanted it, which I never saw coming, because she's a millennial. So how do you begin that process when you know your father or grandfather or mother or grandmother collected, but you really had no idea what that meant?
You don't know what it meant, but when you think about that, do you think about the values? Do you think, is this valuable or is it just junk? What was it to you when you first? I got to ask you that.
For me, it was, I want to get rid of all this now.
Because you just thought it was junk?
No, because I didn't want to have to think about it.
Because a lot of people think that.
I didn't know one way or the other. I'm like, I knew he did it, must have done it for a reason, whatever it was. I didn't do it. He could never get me interested.
So there's collectors. Collectors a lot of times don't even think of, they'll think of value. Of course, there's value there, obviously. But a true collector will collect just about anything, right? Whether it's junk or not. But most of the time, when they collect coins, stamps, whatever, it can be state quarters, which is the most common thing in the world that comes to our store, is a state quarter book, the state quarter collection.
I love that collection.
But everyone has that collection, right? So when they come in, it's really hard for me to tell them this. It's his face value. And the reason why is because the amount of books that are out there on eBay. You just can't get rid of them. So going back to that collector, it wasn't about the value. It was just about collecting those states and those dates, right? And that's a lot of collections are like that. The boomers, they did that. They love to collect everything. They had the coin channel. They had all that stuff there. Now, is it valuable? It could be. A lot of times they're not valuable. You got the state quarter books. They're just not that valuable. The Eisenhower dollars, they're still clad dollars. They're still $1. There are a few differences in some that collect, but that collector collected stuff because they enjoyed collecting. That's what I did. And a lot of times it could be valuable. A lot of times it couldn't. There are also serious collectors that spend a lot of money on the big key dates. Now, when we get those collections, we know. So how would I say, when I evaluate a box of collections, I can see the collector in the box. Does that make sense?
Complete sense.
So if we have a box of pennies, right? And they're penny books, right? And quarter books and nickel books and all that stuff. And they have them all filled out, and then the key dates are missing, right? But then they have a bag of pennies and a bag of nickels and a bag of quarters over here. Alrighty. And all this whole collection, you put together how the guy collected into whereas, am I going to go through 1,000 pennies to see if there's a key date in there? No, because that book is already put together. You see what I mean? So it does help, unless something tragic happened during the middle of his collection, because you have to ask those questions on that. But I don't know. A collector they collect stuff because they enjoy collecting, not for the value a lot of times.
No, it completely makes sense. I've shared with you my passion on some sports collecting, but that's not my real passion. My real passion is classic monster models.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Frankenstein, Dracula,
Yeah.
Wolfman, the Mummy.
Dude, I loved that stuff when I was growing up.
I did too. And I collect those. And my wife continually reminds me, are you ever going to build one? I said, honey, there's two types of monster model collectors, those who collect the model kits and those who build them. I collect the model kits. She goes, why don't you display them? They're all in a box. I said, they're all in my head. And the passion that you just articulated, that's exactly how
they're more
feel.
Valuable in that box.
They're more to me in that box because I know I have them. And I'm still on the lookout for 60s kits from Aurora and Revell.
That's a good point, though, because the collector mind in you, were you thinking that they're in your mind, right? But you also thought about value, right? You were thinking, because I don't put them together. Were you thinking that when you're
Well, I knew the price I was paying for them, somewhere 4 figures. And if I built them and I can build them correctly, I might not paint them correctly. And they might be of sentimental value to me if I recreated everything I made in the 60s. But value wise, they're much more valuable as kits.
So you were thinking that as a kit, sealed, not touched. So yeah. So that's a different type of collector. So there's two different types, or there's probably multiple. There's many different types of collectors, but this is the type of stuff I can really relate to and talk about on a one-on-one conversation. Because a lot of times they're like, "Oh, let me figure out how to do this or that." But this is the passion that I had. So, like, my parents always thought I should. So they knew I collected Eisenhower dollars, but they always gave me everything else. They're like, "Here's some stamps and." Here's son, here, keep me busy. But then I found fishing and everything that for a while. So I stopped doing that. But anyways, yeah, there's always different types of collectors, people that look at value and people that just love to collect and don't care about any value, just doing it for their own peace of mind. And that's a hobby. You know what I mean?
As I mentioned, we live in a town of 20,000 plus,
Mm-hmm.
but one of the things that is very common in Kerrville is estate sales. My wife early on got into the estate sale trail. She knows all the players in town. They call her that English girl. She's from England. And so that English girl is here. And so she drags me along as kind of the banker sometimes and the pickup guy, really. But occasionally you will see a estate sale with a large collection of X, whatever X might be. And one of the things that interests me is vinyl albums.
Yeah.
2 or 3 times I've seen huge vinyl collections where I wanted to come in and just buy it out. And inevitably I'm too late because I go on Saturday when the discounts kick in. But how would you approach someone who has an estate collection and wants to come to sell you a truly large, maybe not a huge amount, but larger than normally? How does that part of your business work?
A lot of times, so I say we buy estates, right? Estates, and we have specific estates that we buy. Mainly, if someone brings me with an estate, we buy gold and silver. That's our main business. But when they come to me with the estate, I always look at it at a value rate for them. It's like, where are they going to get the most money out of? So a business like mine, let's say they have a bunch of silver coins in bullion, we're based off of 10% or less, right? And nothing bad about estate sales or anything like that. Not trying to knock anybody out on estate sales, but generally, if you put your stuff in estate, especially when it's bullion or jewelry or anything like that, the percentages are pretty high. And you're looking at 30 to 40% percentage rates on that, to where I'm paying less than 10% on bullion. I always say that when they bring their estate, hey, I'm putting all my stuff in the estate, like an estate sale, right? To whereas you got to know your percentages. Maybe some estate sales do something different like that for bullion. And they say, look, we're going to give you X for this, because generally when they put the estate stuff, they're going to take 35, 40%, which is, it's normal. Everyone's got to make a living and do that. And yes, silver and gold is and collectibles is what brings the attraction to the deal. And that's what brings to sell all your other stuff that you have typically, right? But if you look at it at a percentage basis, you're probably going to get a better deal on gold and silver on your estate stuff for that. But for collectibles, yeah, vinyl records, dolls, you name it, anything like that. But when it comes to precious metals, I would always tell people that obviously I'm going to buy it, but you're going to get a better deal on percentage rates by selling your precious metals just directly to a coin guy.
If a son or a daughter is preparing to visit you at MR Mint, what should they bring in for you to look at from an estate perspective?
What they bring to us?
Yeah. Would it be the full collection, just loose stuff? How would you suggest they
Oh,
approach?
a lot of times people call me and say, I have a bunch of coins, but I don't know what's in it. I just tell them to throw it in a box and bring it and we'll sort it out. Because generally it's always going to be in a box mixed up. They're going to be mint sets. There's going to be coins in bags and all that stuff. So when they bring it, we'll just lay it out on the table. We'll go in the back room if we have to, if it's a lot of stuff, and we'll just lay it all out. And then we just start from one bag to the next. And it doesn't really matter what form you put it in. You don't have to, I would never it's nice for them to organize it, but don't ever try to clean your coins and stuff like that. That's one thing I would always recommend when they bring their stuff. Don't try to clean up your silverware or your coins or anything like that, because that's a no-no for one, to clean your coins for one. You don't ever do that. Just please don't, because that's happened before. Like seriously used a scrub brush to clean their coins, and that just depletes the value of it. And I've seen some horror stories with the collectible coins that they polished them up, and that's the big no-no. But anyways, yeah, just bring them however you want. Don't break your back. Just put them in a box. We'll take care of it and sort it the appropriate way.
So, Mike, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you if any of our listeners wanted to get in contact with you, either via phone or online, where could they go or find out more about MR Mint, and where is your store located?
So we're located here in Kerrville, the Hill Country, Kerrville, Texas. We're on 1217 Broadway. That's the east end of town. Or you can basically go to MR Home Automation. I'm sorry. You told me about my son earlier. I'm on that too, because I just looked at that. MrMintCoins.com.
Mike, thanks again, and I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Right on, man. Thank you.